Welcome back to Survival on Purpose coverage of the 2021 Blade Show. And I have the honor here of being with Mr. Ethan Becker. And you may recall we've been doing a Kephart knife video series on the channel. And the benchmark we're using is the BK62, which is the Ethan Becker designed Kabar collaboration of the as close as possible to the original Kephart knife that you were able to get a hold of, right?
It's as close. The only difference is in the grind, the primary grind on the blade, because the original was a double convex grind with a couple of little itty bitty tiny cuts across the top, and there's no way to reproduce that mechanically.
Okay.
You got to do it by hand.
I got you.
And of course, all the knives that were made back then were hand ground.
Right.
Every one.
So how did you, if I understand correctly, you found somewhere a Kephart knife that was made for him that really had not been used very much.
It looked as if it was purchased and put in a drawer.
Okay.
And it was put in a drawer probably around 1920. And so I had seen it on my friend Mark Zaleski's table 2 or 3 times, and he had tried to interest me in it. And as you know, it's not a terribly fancy looking blade.
Right.
And I thought, well, it's a nice, it's historically interesting, but yeah. So he was pretty sneaky. He came out to my house and he brought 2 antique Bowie knives. And he said, Ethan, and this is true, he's not a user, he's a collector. And he said, I want to see what you think of cutting with these old knives. And so we went up in the woods, and so I tried the Bowie knives out, and they were okay. One of them, I think, was dated to 1830. And that was a thrill. Going to Mark's house, I love to carve dinner at Mark's house because he's always got some interesting antique he wants to see, wants to watch me lust after. And so he pulled the Kephart out, and that knife hadn't been sharpened since 1920.
Wow.
And it wanted to cut. I didn't have to urge it to cut. It wanted to cut. And I remember looking up at Mark and going, how much is this going to cost me?
Did you already decide it's going home with you, right?
It was already home. It was not leaving the property.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
So, and it's been a real interesting little kind of side trip in my life, because the excitement it generated amazed me. I'd been a Kephart fan since I was a kid. There was a Camping and Woodcraft on my shelf when I was 15 years old. And I'd read a couple of his other books. And my both grandmothers, knew him in St. Louis.
Wow.
They belonged to the same library that he ran when he was in St. Louis. So, you know Joe Flowers.
I do.
Joe is Global Bushcraft, great guy, good knife designer. About 2/3 crazy, but he's all right. And he called me up and he said they want to see the knife over at the museum, which was over in North Carolina, and it's worth a trip over there. University of North Carolina in, can't remember the name of the town, having a Biden moment. And so went over there, and I got to handle his knife. That was a big thrill. Now, I didn't actually get to manipulate it because they had it wired to something, but I laid hands on it.
So you're talking about the one that had been sharpened and used.
That was his knife.
Yeah.
He used it every day for a long time. And it was rough, buddy. It was really rough. It had been used half to death.
So what do you think, because you've designed some really great knives, what do you think it is about that particular design that makes it so useful? Like you said, it wants to cut.
It wants to cut. It's got a nice high grind. It's not too thick. It has the actual edge geometry. If you have a primary grind that comes down and there's too much of a ridge and you're trying to,
right,
the knife won't cut. And every knife is a compromise between a cold chisel and a razor blade. And you got to figure out what you want to use it for. If you're going to be doing a lot of wood processing, batoning specifically, and you're trying to split a lot of firewood, you want a 1/4-inch blade. If you want to carve and cut on stuff, you want a nice thin blade. My buddy Dan Eastland makes a bunch of 16th-inch knives that are pretty darn good, for carving and for doing
That's Dogwood Customs, right?
Yeah, Dogwood Custom knives. And he makes a great cut. If you've ever seen one of his custom versions of the Kephart,
I got to hold one at Blade Show a couple years ago.
Yeah,
but I haven't used one.
Well, they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
I hate to say that. He may hear it. He may hear this, and he's much more used to me giving him grief. You got to pick a compromise for what you're going to use a knife for. If you do a lot of game processing, you don't want a 1/4-inch knife. You can use it for that, but you're not going to be as happy as you are with let's say a BK16 or the Kephart. It's just the way it is. I'd rather have this little guy, which is 5/32 thick and full height ground. I'd rather have it than for game processing than a much bigger knife that had more weight to it, more width.
So the sales have been good on the BK62?
Been pretty good. They're better than I thought they would be, but there's a Kephart cult, of which I'm happy to say I'm one.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
And what I really wanted to do with that knife was to give people something that they could experience the greatest woodsman I know of in American history that he used for everything.
I just want to say thanks for taking the time to do that, because I think it's a really cool knife. And thank you also for taking time to sit down and do this video, because I know there's people. I've been watching you. If I've seen you throughout the day, there's always like a group of people that want to talk to you and pick your brain and just kind of soak themselves in your knowledge, because you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I can tell when I look in the mirror.
Well, thank you so very much. I really
welcome,
appreciate
Brian.
it.
Hey,
and have a great rest of the weekend.
I'm planning on it. This is where I want to be.
There you go. And thank you for watching Survival on Purpose coverage of the 2021 SHOT Show with Mr. Ethan Becker himself here. We're going to see if we can find Joe Flowers somewhere. I'm sure he's here.